everyone, and welcome to another Operate First Data Science Community Meetup. Today we have Humair, who is also a senior software engineer in the Open Services group. He's going to give an overview of the Operate First cluster instance. So over to you, Humair.
Hello, just gonna share my screen and wait for confirmation from one person that it's viewable. Can you guys see it? Cool. All right, so just full screen that. All right, so welcome everyone. As Akanksha mentioned, this is a brief overview of the Operate First Cloud instance. And I am Humair Khan, senior software engineer at Red Hat, part of the Office of the CTO, as part of the Open Services group. And so in this presentation, it will be a cloud overview of the the Operate First instance, which is primarily the OpenShift clusters. And also we'll go over the Open Data Hub components that are deployed on those clusters. Which is generally Jupyter Hub, Trino, Superset, and Selden. And then also just kind of make a quick mention of other useful services. We'll also talk about the documentation that's available to you with regards to these services and other sort of GitOpsy stuff, and also how you can get involved and contribute. So yeah. So what is the Operate First Cloud instance? It is a collection of OpenShift clusters. We group these clusters by what we call environments. Environments is a totally made up concept by us. It's just a way for us to group these clusters together. And and they're managed by the cluster ops subgroup under the SIG operations for Operate First. If you want to read more, I think these slides will be handed out. So you'll find throughout all these slides, there'll be these little links. And for this particular link, you'll be kind of directed towards the SIG operations page where you can read the charter. You can also learn more about this cluster ops subgroup that is primarily focused on operating these clusters. And the meetings that they're all fairly open for anybody to join if you're interested in taking part and just saying hi. Those are also made available over here on this page. And these clusters, they're centrally managed via Advanced Cluster Management, ACM, and Argo CD. Everything is managed through Git, GitHub, via GitOps methodology. Won't go too much into GitOps. I kind of make some assumptions here that you guys might be somewhat familiar with it, but a brief primer is we basically stored the entire OpenShift, all of our OpenShift clusters, their state into Git, in this case, GitHub. And so if you kind of just think about the clusters in general, they're made up of all these different configuration files, and these files can be stored in Git, and that's what we do. And we have a tool called Argo CD that basically takes what's there in Git and deploys it. And it also kind of ensures that these two states are in sync. Not only do we store our clusters state in Git, which is you'll come to find that it's called the apps repo under the Operate First org. We also store the applications that are deployed onto these clusters. We also store their state in Git as well. And Argo CD, the same instance, is also deploying all of that. So if, for example, if Jupyter Hub's configurations are also stored in Git for all of the clusters. And if somebody needs their PVC expanded, most likely you can just go into this repo and make a change to a file, and the Argo CD will sync it, and then you'll get an expand PVC. So that's a 2-minute overview of GitOps. Also want to make note that the Operate First Cloud instance is not interchangeable with Operate First as a whole. The latter is a philosophy, while the former is a living, opinionated application of the philosophy, right? So Operate First as a philosophy is just about operating in the open, right? And Operate First Cloud instance is a way to do that, but it's not the only way to do that. So this entire presentation is about the instance. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes people get those two confused. So Yeah, I mentioned environments. Also want to clarify environments. So again, think of them as a grouping of clusters. Grouping can be dictated by organization. So you'll hear terms like MOC and OSC thrown around. Those are just organizations, or cluster region. So in our cases, like we have an environment we refer to as EMEA, which is like the European region. The naming can be a bit more consistent, we admit. Like why is some organization in some region, why are they not all regions, right? The environment grouping was done ad hoc at some time ago, and because we don't have that many, we haven't really put that much investment in organizing this further. But yeah, the current environments are the MOC, OSC, and EMEA. Where do these clusters, all the clusters that make up the Operate First Cloud instance, where do they come from, right? So they come from different sources. Some come from organizations, teams, other collaboration projects. So MOC is just a joint collaboration with Mass Open Cloud. They provision hardware for clusters like Smog and Infra. And OSC is a joint collaboration with Host Climate. So we have two clusters there from the hardware provision from them. Then we also have Red Hat from the Okta side. We have Balrog, clusters like Balrog, they are provisioned via Red Hat. And so this is the cloud. The rectangles represent the environments that I've talked about. So MOC, OSC, EMEA, and the clusters that are in there. We have some other clusters, but those are usually like demo clusters meant for a very single use case for a single team. So I'm not mentioning those here. So under MOC, we have Smog, Curator, Infra. Under OSC, we have OSCL1, OSCL2. EMEA is Morty, Rick, Balrog. These are the clusters in the European side. As data scientists and engineers, you probably don't care about all of these. In fact, you probably only care about these three. And I mean, there might be some niche cases where you might care about like Curator, but in large part, I think in my experience, these are the three that generally the data scientists and engineers, they kind of like engage with. So I'll focus mostly on these, okay? And in particular, I'll talk about the Open Data Hub deployments on these three clusters, right? So currently there's three different clusters with three different ODH installations, OSCL1 and OSCL2, the ones over here. They're generally used for OS climate work, and then Smog is used for everything else. The dream is only one ODH installation instead of three, managed by one team with the help from the ODH community. So that's what we're trying to get to. We're not there yet. But yeah, but that's the dream. All three deployments are very similar to each other, and yes, it's just more about like what data is being backed by which ODH installation. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But let's talk about ODH on Smog. So, okay, ODH, if you don't know, Open Data Hub is a it's kind of like this meta. It's this platform for data-driven technologies, and has various different components that it provisions different services. And we provision 4 of them on Smog. Jupyter Hub is one, Trino is another, and Superset and Seldon are the other 2. Jupyter Hub. So I'll give a brief kind of breakdown on these tools, but I'm not going to go too much into them. Otherwise, we'll be here for like 5 hours. So Jupyter Hub is a server that provisions other notebook servers. If you know about it, this is kind of like what it looks like. And you basically get a notebook that you can select, and it will spin it up and you can use it, right? And if you want to know how you can get your own notebook on there, we have docs for that. And yeah, so anybody has access to this, right? If you have a GitHub account, anybody in the world can access this. It's fairly open. You know, you just need the link. Oh, and should mention, all of these links you can find in our documentation. Again, these links are provided in the slides, so don't worry about that. But for all the Open Data Hub tools, you can kind of follow this link, and then you'll find a Open Data Hub section over here. You click that, and then you'll see the links to all of what I'm showing you here. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so that's Jupyter Hub, and also talked about Trino, which is a distributed SQL query engine. It supports a lot of different like data stores that then lets you query via SQL queries. We primarily use it for S3 buckets. We have some cases where we also have Postgres databases hooked up to it. If you have a database you want to hook up to our Trino instance, can definitely do that. We have docs on specifically S3 buckets and Postgres, but the process for the other ones I think is relatively similar. And yeah, on the Smog instance, we just have user file name access. So you need to specifically create a user for this. But in the future, we're probably going to just add like programmatic token access. We'll explain more about that later, but this is what the Trino UI looks like. It's kind of useless. What you really generally engage Trino with is via programmatic access, via the CLI, or with a tool, something like CloudBeaver. And we also have that, by the way. Yeah, so, and then there's Superset. You can also kind of query what you have backed by Trino and other SQL databases and put them in neat, pretty visualizations. That's Superset. So I think I have it open. Yeah, so like this is an example of a Superset dashboard that somebody from this community has created. And they're basically querying data that was backed by Trino. I think this one might be, this is for OS Climate, but yeah, it's that's an example of a dashboard right there. And then we have Selden. Not going to go about, I don't really know much about Selden, so I'm not going to cover that too much detail. But like if you're interested about it, reach out to me. I can forward you to people who are more familiar with the Selden instance on Smog. Cool. There's also other services that you might, as a data engineer / scientist, might be interested in. We also have Strimzy available on Smog. We have a Kafka instance that we manage. If you're interested in, if you need some topics, you can create them. If you want your own Kafka instance, also we can provision that. But you would have to maintain it. And then there's, we also have a Thanos instance, Thanos, which is basically Prometheus at scale. We forward all the clusters I've showed you, except for the OSC clusters, forward their data to Thanos. So if you want to visualize metrics about those clusters or applications running on those clusters, we have that set up in place, and you can visualize that in Grafana. Okay, so if that's something that you're interested in, that's also available. This is also all on Smog, by the way. And then CloudBeaver, this is not part of ODH, but you can use this to query Trino. And this is kind of what it looks like. So like I said, usually you interact with Trino via programmatic access. CloudBeaver is just another tool for you to visualize. It's basically querying Trino in the background. It's just running SQL queries, but it's giving you a nice little GUI, and you can look at tables and the data in them for all the tables that exist in Trino. And yeah, so that's Smog. What about OS Climate? So those are the two other clusters, OSCL1 and OSCL2. If you're interested in the OS Climate initiative and want to get involved there, these are the clusters in general that you would interact with and the tools that are available in these clusters. Why are there two clusters, right? So why is there a CL1 and a CL2? So as the name suggests, the CL1 was the first iteration, and it is now going to transition to a more kind of development level work at a development at a cluster-wide level. So what that means is that there might be some cluster instabilities in the future, right? So we're going to be testing operators and whatever that affect the entire cluster. So that's why we're probably going to move all the folks that need like a stable cluster to the new cluster, and that's going to happen in the coming weeks. And just note that it's not a production level cluster. The OSCL2 is the most recent OSC cluster deployed at the time of this writing or this presentation, and it is meant for experiments at the service level. So like by that I mean if you have like experimental notebooks, if you want to test a notebook out, or if you want to attach a Trino database that you just want to see like if it works with Trino, like what does it look like that's for this cluster. And so it's at the service level. So like you're not going to see like the Openshift console like disappear or something, or like everything one like sort of development work affects like other applications. That's not, so you can kind of expect this cluster to be relatively stable. However, you should also assume this is not production level. So and that brings me to a side note. No cluster provided or managed by Opera First should be considered a production level, right? So we do try to keep clusters stable and secure, but we make no guarantees, right? So because this is all very kind of like GitOps managed, we put things in the on GitHub, but we do encrypt all our secrets, or we kind of leave them out. our team is relatively small and we're managing a wide variety of clusters. So you should certainly not assume that the data or whatever you put on there is like 100% secure. So just want to put that out there. But back to the CL1 cluster. So it's smaller than the small cluster. And we kind of only have the ODH deployment with the aside from Cloud Reaver and also KFP Tecton. This doesn't exist in Smog. And so I mentioned that Trino in Smog is just like username password access. And on the OSCL1 cluster, you can also have OAuth login, and this will you can use your OAuth login to access Trino programmatically. Trino doesn't have this by default, to my knowledge. So this is just a side service that I wrote, so you can use to gain a token, and then you can log into Trino if that's something that you need to do. It's just a page that looks like this. You log in, you use your OAuth login for GitHub, and then you'll get a token that you can use to log into Trino. Put that in your notebook or CLI, whatever. This doesn't exist in Smog, but we can add it. There just hasn't been any requests for it yet. And KFP Tecton, so ML pipelines. This is not in Smog, though this is heavily requested. And the reason why it's on this cluster and not in Smog is because we have it. This is a very old deployment. The newer deployment it doesn't work yet. We're trying to get it to work, and the old deployment is also very bloated and installs a lot of additional tooling that it doesn't really need, and it also interferes with other services that we have. But we have it deployed here, and it's available for you to use. So the second OS Climate cluster provides basically the same thing, right? Except it doesn't have KFP Tecton. So, and it's for the same reasons, basically. But because the demand for this seems relatively high, we're probably just going to do the old deployment. And as we try to kind of trim it down. So what's different about these two clusters? Like this is the CL1, if they're offering mostly the same thing. This is the data that's kind of stored. So like Trino, the buckets that is backed by versus on like CL1 versus CL2, it's different, right? Yeah, and then we're gonna probably put I'm not sure if some of the ones about storage S3 buckets that are in CL1 are they going to come to CL2. That part I'm not clear on, but yeah, everybody that's coming to work on the OS climate initiative and wants to use a cluster is probably going to be CL2 from now on. So just unless you're like developing new tooling that might affect the cluster. So that's that. OSC cluster services are not as easily explorable yet. So I did mention that there's this kind of link, this page for all the links for all the services that we offered, but this is very Smog cluster centric. The OSC cluster doesn't have as clean of a page to give you all the links for all the services I'm talking about. So if you want to like check those out. We have a working group right now that's kind of working on bringing all Operate First projects more visible and easily explorable, but we're not there yet. So just for the sake of this presentation, I've put them here. And once these slides are handed out, you can also follow the links here to find those services. Okay, so that's cool. How do you use this stuff, right? So it starts with getting access. So most of the times you can self-provision access to these services by just checking the docs. And so list of the services basically just like that link just takes you here. And you can, so let's say, for example, you need access to like Superset or Jupyter Hub. You can usually like just follow the links for the specific service, or ODH. Jupyter Hub is under ODH, so we expand that. We can kind of see, okay, so or Superset, we can kind of see like, provision Superset access. These are the docs on how to do that. So in the slide, I mentioned self-provision. We do generally like forward people to kind of, if you have docs on doing it yourself, we just tell you like, hey, can you do it yourself? Because again, this is a way for us to scale, because again, we're a small team and there's all these new services are being added on. GitOps allows us to put some of the work onus onto the benefactor. So just like a few PRs here and there, they're generally small in scope, like, and I'll show you an example of that. but you will need some basic Git knowledge or some familiarity with GitHub, and you will need to make a pull request. But if you need something, just check the docs first. So if you need like your PVC expanded or whatever, I'll go over some common requests. But yeah, just check the docs. And if you're not sure, and if the docs are not clear, or if you have just additional questions or requests, like you can always go to the support repo. And this is your like kind of one stop, like you can always ask any question here. And you don't have to be afraid of whether it's in the right place or not. And you can just like make an issue, right? Cool. So here's an example of somebody that was like asking for Superset Access. So again, if it's a request that we have documentation for, and this person's basically asking for these two users to get access to the Superset instance on Smog, we're probably just going to reply like this and say, can you follow the instructions here and make a PR? and yeah, it's again, it's in this case, right? Like it's a very simple PR. They basically have to take this file and just like add their GitHub handles to it. And that was it. They got access to Superset on Smog. Right. And then once you make that PR, one of the project maintainers will just need to review it, say it looks good to me. That's a / look good to me. And then somebody needs to approve it, which means it's good for merge. And then it'll get merged. And once it's merged, like I showed you in the initial slides, Argo CD will then deploy those changes, and you will get access. Usually all access, if it's not already open to the public, it's done through OpenShift RBAC. And like in this case, there's an OpenShift group that they're adding their names to. So yeah, so I expect to take some part in this kind of like GitOps process, right? Like making PRs. If you need something, you might see like a request like, hey, can you just add a change like yourself? And yeah, so examples of other common requests. So we get people asking, how do I add an image to Jupyter Hub, right? So we have docs for that. You can follow the link. How do I get more space on Jupyter Hub? So like expand your PVC, we have docs for that. And how do I add a new bucket to Trino? Right, and then there's other common requests. And if there's a common request that we don't have docs for, let us know and we'll add for them. Or you can also add for them. They're relatively easy. It's just you create a markdown, right? And that's basically all you have to do. How can I get a new service or tool deployed on the Operate First cloud? So maybe ODH is not enough, or Stream0 or whatever is not enough. You also want some other services, right, available to you. So how can you get it? The first thing is always you make an issue first. So you want eyes on it, right? And don't like direct message people, just because then this is all about being in the open. So make an issue first, and do it in the support repo, which I showed you earlier. Provide link to docs for the service and as much operational info as you can. And some questions worth considering, I list them here, is like, what is the service and what does it do? Who is it for? Is it just for your team, or is it something you think that like everybody might be interested in? Is it OpenShift and Kubernetes friendly? So again, all of this stuff is being deployed on OpenShift. So you have to consider, like, sometimes it might also be Kubernetes friendly, but not OpenShift friendly, because OpenShift, like, like the images might not have the right user permissions, or there might be like some security context constraints that are really generous. So we got to consider those things too. Does it have multi-tenancy support? Like if there's something multiple people might like is there does the server support like various different users, right? For example, we have Cloudbeaver, which doesn't really have good multi-tenancy support. So then we're looking for alternatives to that, right? What is the operational burden of managing this service? Like, and who will take on this burden? Right. So like I said, this is we have a very small operations team. So is this something that you're willing to operate, right? Generally, if like it's not a high in demand service, then we might deploy it, but then you might not expect as much of a operational commitment. Okay, cool. You made an issue. So how long do you need to wait? right? It depends on who's servicing the issue. So if it's the operate first admin team, whenever we can like fit it into our cycles, basically, right? Like whenever we can find the time, and there's no guarantee of turnaround time. So I will kind of let you know that if it's again not a service that's like high in demand, then it might take a while, right? But what the beauty of like GitOps is that, and because we make everything so transparent and public, is that if you or someone you know is like kind of an expert in this area in this service, right, they can deploy it, right? They just need to make a PR and add the right manifests and what have you, right? So, and that turnaround for time for that would really just depend on your familiarity with the with OpenShift and Git, GitHub, and the service being deployed. But we will help you, right? We will help you get acquainted with our tooling, and we will work and support you in deploying and operating that service. So don't be shy. We're here to help. How do I get access to my own OCP namespace so I can deploy my own tooling services? So if you are OpenShift savvy and you just want a space to deploy like your data science applications and all that stuff, we have all these clusters that you can provision a namespace and deploy stuff to it. There are certain restrictions, like you don't get cluster admin access for obvious reasons, but you can certainly get a namespace. And if you need certain operators and stuff, you can get that too. That we refer to this as like a project onboarding, and this happens quite frequently. And so frequently that we have an entire notebook that automates this process. So, so you'll need to onboard your project, and that generally means that you're just like creating an OCP namespace, OpenShift namespace, and you need to have a quota in mind. So, how much CPU, memory, storage you plan to use, who is going to need access? Is it just you? Is it like multiple people? And what cluster will this be on? Is this an OS climate effort? Like, is this a smog cluster for everybody type thing? And yeah, so this process is entirely automated. That Jupyter Hub instance I showed you, you can. So we have docs on how you can use a notebook there to kind of basically do this entire thing yourself and make a pull request. And the notebook looks something like this. And it's relatively straightforward. You don't even have to read all of this. I'll tell you now, basically, the only effort provided on your part is to like just fill out the variables here and just fork and clone the repository. And the variables are like, oh, what's your GitHub username? And what namespace name do you want? Like very easy stuff. And then once you fill that out and you fork and clone the repository, you can execute all of this. You don't even have to read it, right? Although it's nice if you read it, because then you get familiar with the tooling, but you don't have to, right? So yeah, so that's the notebook. And yeah, so if you make for project onboarding, you can make an issue in the support repo. There's a template for it. But as soon as you make it, we're just going to be like, can you use this notebook? So you can also just directly go and use that notebook and make a PR. But yeah, so you want to know more and you have questions. So you can be part of the community, right? So you can visit our website. It's operate-first.cloud. You can join our GitHub organization. You can do that by making a pull request, and the docs are right here. So I think they're fairly straightforward. You don't have to do a lot. Essentially, you just basically like change a file and you add these lines, like super easy, right? And if you already have a team, then you just like finding that area and just adding one line. So like your name. And we can join our Slack. We're relatively active there. Some notable channels is the support channel. So this is the Slack equivalent of the support repo. You can basically ask any question there, right? And we'll do our best to help you. And if we don't have, and sometimes you get answers about like general OpenShift questions. So we might like, even if you don't know the answer, we might like also just direct you to where that might be a proper question to ask. So yeah, definitely you can ask your questions there if you prefer a direct line of communication. The announcements channel is so just a way to get announcements about Opera First as a whole. So I think sometimes we hijack that channel. Then there's the SIG operations channel. This is where the operations discussions happen and regarding all of the OpenShift clusters that I've talked about. You can learn more about the SIG operations group, and its charter is linked here. Just kind of tells you, it's kind of like the charter is actually but yeah, you can see what is it about, what did they cover, and what is in scope, and what have you. The docs on existing cloud operations is also linked in the slide. You can also find this via the website, which I linked in the first line, but I think it's not as clear. So you click this community handbook, and then you click the GitHub docs, and this is where it is. Probably could be made a bit better, but we have a special working group for that. So you will see different changes to the website, making it more friendly, hopefully. But you can also find the link here. So. And the apps repo, right? So this is where you can find the state of all clusters. And most likely, if you're like looking to make a PR, you're making it to this. If it's like about getting access or requesting a new service or whatever. So that's where Argo CD basically deploys everything from. It's this repo, right? So all the services, you can see they're listed here. And yeah, Argo CD is constantly watching this repo and like deploying changes to the different clusters. Yeah, that's it. That's all, folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Umair, for this amazing presentation. I'm sure everybody got all the information they needed. And if not, if you have any questions, this would be the right time to ask all the questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Umair. This was really, really great. Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I was thinking about is this is kind of a group of data scientists that are now made aware more directly of the like platform that we have available to us. But like on the flip side, is there anything that you as someone who manages this platform that's at least serving Open Data Hub that you would find like helpful for a group of data scientists to focus on, whether it's like opening more issues, requesting different tools? I mean, what in your opinion would kind of support the platform from our involvement?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of areas. Good question, Michael. I always use free labor. Just kidding. Yeah. So one thing is, so all the services I kind of talk about in like the I don't know if I can quickly go back there. Basically, like all the services that I was kind of going over. So we deploy them and we try to like operate them and what have you, but we're not like service experts, right? We're not experts in Trino, and it is really like, for example, through the OSCE initiative with the involvement of people like Eric that we've kind of learned more and more about it, right? But again, at the end of the day, you guys are, as you're learning more using Superset and what have you, and you're learning more, we find out like through you more about these services. We have docs and we want to be able to kind of like expand those docs and make it more accessible to other folks that might have the same questions that you did that now you have found the answers to. And essentially, that's all to say that we could use help in expanding our documentation, right? And if you go to, for example, the docs, the operational docs, which is the GitOps docs, you'll see like at the bottom, like contributing to GitOps docs, right? It shows you like it's really easy to kind of contribute to these docs, right? You're, like I said, you're essentially just creating markdown files and you're just like writing up, or you're editing existing markdown files. So like when you learn more about Superset and you think that, oh, other users would also benefit from knowing such and such, right? We can use expansion on those docs over there, right? And yeah, and other than that, like I said, it's the operational aspect. If you want a new service and you feel like you're up to the task of operating it, like we can also definitely use help there. Or if you want to get involved in operating existing services. So can we get a link to this deck? I believe that will be handed out by people, not me, but I can also give them to you. Will this be made available like on the site, Akanksha, or is this?
Yes, we will share this presentation deck and a meetup recording with all of you after the meetup.
Oh, Andrilla.
Yes. So if users require GPU nodes for their workflows, demos, or any of their workloads, is there um, maybe the OSCL1 cluster, or is there like any cluster which is available for public use right now?
Good question. So just note that Smog doesn't have GPUs. For GPU, it's the OSCL1 cluster has, I think, GPUs available to right now. Don't quote me on it though. Can definitely find that out for you. We are working on getting GPUs available to the OSCL2 cluster. But they're not there yet. So this is hopefully something that will be available in the OSCL2 cluster in like a week.
Got it.
But we'll send an announcement out in the announcements channel. So
Awesome. Yeah,
watch for
we
that.
had somebody interested in trying out GPU, so I was just curious. Okay.
I think the CL1 cluster has it. Reach out to me afterwards, and then I can verify that for you.
I'm almost certain that it does have
Yeah.
at least a couple of GPUs.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions?
All right, then. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Humair, for giving a wonderful presentation. Hope to see you all again after 2 weeks for another data science community meetup. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.